23 minutes. That is how long 301 people sat inside Saudia Flight 163 after it landed safely at Riyadh International Airport. The aircraft had suffered an in-flight fire, but the pilots executed a successful emergency landing. The aircraft was on the ground. The engines were still running. Fire was consuming the cabin, and the crew never opened the doors. What you're about to see is what happened during those 23 minutes, why the captain did not order immediate evacuation, and how a textbook emergency landing became a mass fatality event because of decisions made not in the air, but on the ground. August 19th, 1980. Saudia Flight 163 prepared for departure from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. The aircraft was a Lockheed L-1011 TriStar. Registration HZ-AHK, one of the most advanced wide-body aircraft of its era, powered by 3 Rolls-Royce RB211 turbofan engines. This particular aircraft had been delivered to Saudi just 5 months earlier, essentially brand new. The flight was a routine domestic service from Riyadh to Jeddah, approximately 850 kilometers, roughly 1 hour in the air. On board were 287 passengers and 14 crew members, 301 people total. The captain had accumulated over 7,000 flight hours and was thoroughly familiar with the L-1011. The first officer had logged over 1,900 hours. All 3 cockpit crew members were fully qualified and current on type. At 7:14 p.m., the TriStar began its takeoff roll. The departure was completely routine. The aircraft climbed into the evening sky over Riyadh, cleared to flight level 260. The passengers settled in. Cabin crew prepared for service. Nothing suggested what was coming. But 7 minutes after takeoff, everything changed. A warning light illuminated on the flight engineer's panel. Smoke detector, aft cargo compartment, C3. The warning was accompanied by an audible alarm. The crew immediately began fire checklist procedures. They initially treated this as a precautionary indication. False alarms can occur, sensor malfunctions happen. But within 2 minutes, the situation removed all ambiguity. Cabin crew called the cockpit. They reported smoke in the passenger cabin, directly above the cargo hold where the fire was detected. The captain immediately ordered a return to Riyadh. Air traffic control acknowledged and cleared them priority handling. They were approximately 100 kilometers east of the airport. The return would take 10 to 12 minutes. During the descent, conditions in the cabin deteriorated rapidly. Smoke intensified and spread forward from the rear. Passengers panicked. The passenger oxygen masks deployed automatically. But oxygen masks are designed for depressurization, not smoke. They deliver oxygen-enriched air. They do not filter toxic fumes. Passengers were still breathing smoke-contaminated air through the masks. At 7:21 p.m., the main landing gear touched down smoothly on runway 34 left. The landing was textbook perfect. Thrust reversers deployed. The aircraft decelerated normally. Fire trucks were positioned and ready along the runway. At this precise moment, every single person on board was still alive. All that was required now was immediate evacuation. But that is not what happened. If you want aviation investigations that explain what actually happened, hit subscribe. I focus on evidence, not speculation. After touchdown, the captain did not order evacuation. He did not shut down the engines. Instead, he kept all 3 engines running and continued to taxi the aircraft. He believed he could return to the terminal. He believed the fire could be managed. This belief would prove catastrophically wrong. The first officer questioned this decision. His tone on the cockpit voice recorder reflects growing concern. The flight engineer also expressed worry. But in the cockpit culture of 1980, the captain's decisions were essentially final. First officers could suggest. They could not override. As the aircraft taxied with engines at ground idle, the fire in the cargo hold intensified dramatically. Smoke poured through the ventilation systems and through gaps forming in the damaged cabin floor. The rear passenger cabin became completely obscured by dense black smoke. Passengers stumbled blindly in the aisles. Children were separated from parents. Cabin crew near the exits instinctively moved to open the doors. But standard procedure required cockpit authorization before opening doors with engines running. The reason is straightforward physics. Jet exhaust from operating turbofan engines creates extremely high-velocity airflow at temperatures exceeding 400 degrees Celsius. Opening doors exposes evacuating passengers to that jet blast. Engine intakes create powerful suction. Anyone approaching the front of an operating engines can be pulled in. So the cabin crew did what their training demanded. They positioned themselves at the doors. They prepared to open them. They waited for the evacuation order. That order never came. Outside, ground fire crews followed at a safe distance. They could see smoke pouring from every seam in the fuselage. They knew people were in immediate danger. But airport protocols prohibited approaching an aircraft with engines operating. They waited for engine shutdown. They waited for clearance to approach. Approximately 3 minutes after the aircraft stopped, the engines finally shut down. Not because the captain ordered it. The fire had progressively damaged the electrical systems that controlled engine management. The engines stopped on their own because the fire destroyed them. Now evacuation should have begun immediately. But the doors still did not open. Analysis of the cockpit voice recorder suggests the captain was attempting to assess the fire's severity. He was checking with the flight engineer on system status. He was querying cabin crew through the interphone about conditions in the cabin. He did not give the evacuation order. The fire, no longer suppressed by the airflow of flight, intensified exponentially. The cargo hold fire spread upward through the compromised cabin floor. Interior materials began to ignite. Seat cushions, overhead storage bins, wall panels. The temperature in some areas exceeded 600 degrees Celsius. The cabin was transforming into a furnace. Toxic smoke from burning plastics and synthetic materials filled every compartment. It contained carbon monoxide, cyanide compounds, and other deadly chemicals. Passengers lost consciousness. Cabin crew, many positioned in the aft galley preparing for evacuation, were overcome by fumes. Some passengers attempted to open emergency exits themselves. But the doors on the L-1011 require specific procedures. They are heavy. They have complex locking mechanisms. In the smoke and panic and failing consciousness, it was impossible. Outside, rescue crews watched in mounting horror. No slides had deployed. No doors had opened. No communication was coming from the flight deck. Standard protocol required coordination with the cockpit before forcing entry to avoid interfering with an evacuation already in progress. 23 minutes after the aircraft came to its final stop, rescue crews finally received clearance to approach. They forced entry through multiple cabin doors. Every single person on board was dead. All 301. Passengers were found slumped in their seats, in the aisles, and near exits they had tried but failed to open. Cabin crew were found at their duty stations. Some collapsed beside doors they had been prepared to open but were never authorized to use. The cockpit crew was found at their positions. The captain in the left seat, the first officer in the right, the flight engineer at his panel. The aircraft had landed successfully 23 minutes earlier. Everyone had survived the emergency. No one survived the delay. This investigation revealed critical failures in evacuation procedures. Subscribe to understand how aviation learns from tragedy. The investigation was led by the Saudi Arabian Presidency of Civil Aviation, with participation from the United States National Transportation Safety Board, Lockheed, and Rolls-Royce. The central question seemed incomprehensible. Why did the crew not evacuate immediately after landing? The physical evidence was unambiguous. All 3 landing gear functioned properly. All 3 engines were operating normally when the aircraft stopped. Flight controls were intact. The structure was sound. Every door and every emergency slide functioned correctly when tested after the fire. Nothing was mechanically broken. The cockpit voice recorder survived the fire and provided crucial evidence. The recordings revealed the captain's priorities after landing. His focus was on returning the aircraft to the terminal. He discussed engine restart procedures with the flight engineer. He asked about the feasibility of moving the aircraft after fire crews extinguished the blaze. These were logistical concerns. They were completely inappropriate for the situation. The CVR also captured at least 3 separate instances where the first officer recommended stopping immediately and beginning evacuation. The flight engineer expressed increasing concern about worsening fire indications. But the hierarchical command structure meant the captain's decision stood. That structure silenced the warnings that desperately needed to be heard. The investigation identified 5 converging systemic failures. First, inadequate evacuation training. Saudia's program, like many airlines of that era, emphasized aircraft preservation. Pilots were trained to save the aircraft whenever possible. This created institutional pressure to minimize disruption even during emergencies. Second, no mandatory evacuation requirement. In 1980, regulations left the decision to evacuate to the captain's discretion. Captains were expected to assess and decide. That discretionary framework assumed captains would always prioritize passenger survival. That assumption proved deadly. Third, poor cockpit-to-cabin communication. Cabin crew could directly see passengers losing consciousness. They felt the heat building. They could barely breathe. But they had no effective way to convey that severity to the flight deck. The captain was making life and death decisions with incomplete information. Fourth, engines remained running. This single factor may have been the most deadly contributing cause. Those 3 minutes of running engines delayed evacuation long enough for conditions to become unsurvivable. Had the captain ordered engine shutdown within 30 seconds of stopping, the outcome might have been entirely different. Fifth, hierarchical cockpit culture. The command structure prevented effective crew resource management. Concerns that should have changed the outcome were expressed, but ultimately ignored. The final conclusion was clear. The accident was caused by the crew's failure to immediately evacuate the aircraft after landing. The fire was completely survivable. The landing was perfect. What killed 301 people was the 23 minutes that followed. Every aviation disaster changes procedures. Stay with me to see what changed after this. Saudia Flight 163 forced the entire global aviation industry to fundamentally rethink emergency evacuation. Before this accident, evacuation after landing was a discretionary judgment call. Captains weighed factors, including operational considerations, and decided whether evacuation was truly necessary. Saudia 163 demonstrated that this flexibility was deadly. The first major change removed all discretion entirely. ICAO established new mandatory protocols. If fire or smoke is detected and the aircraft lands, evacuation begins immediately without exception. No delay for taxiing to a gate. No time for situation assessment. No consideration of operational factors. The aircraft stops. All engines shut down within 30 seconds. The captain orders immediate evacuation. All doors open. All slides deploy. This procedure is now drilled into every airline pilot from their first day of training, reinforced annually, and tested in simulators. It is a non-negotiable absolute. The second change addressed cockpit-to-cabin communication. New protocols established how cabin crew must report emergency severity. Not vague statements like, "We have smoke in the cabin," but precise, urgent communications. Passengers are losing consciousness. Heavy smoke throughout. We need immediate evacuation now. Modern wide-body aircraft are also equipped with cabin surveillance cameras that give the flight deck a live visual feed of conditions throughout the cabin. Captains can now directly see what is happening, rather than relying on interphone reports alone. The third change revolutionized cockpit culture through mandatory crew resource management training. CRM fundamentally changed how cockpits operate. First officers now receive extensive training in assertiveness techniques. They learn specific phraseology to challenge captain decisions when safety is compromised. Captains receive intensive training in actively soliciting input and weighing crew concerns. The hierarchical structure that allowed the captain of Saudia 163 to override urgent warnings has been systematically dismantled. Modern cockpits function as collaborative teams where every voice carries weight. The fourth change made engine shutdown a memory item. Memory items are critical actions so important they are executed immediately from memory without consulting any checklist. The moment an aircraft stops after an emergency landing involving fire or smoke, engines shut down. No discussion, no delay, no consideration of future aircraft movement. Passenger survival is the absolute priority that overrides everything else. The fifth change introduced the 90-second certification standard. All commercial transport aircraft must now demonstrate that complete evacuation of all passengers and crew can be accomplished in 90 seconds under worst-case conditions. Half of all emergency exits are blocked to simulate damage. The cabin is darkened to emergency lighting only. The test uses regular volunteers of various ages and physical abilities, not trained athletes. If the evacuation takes longer than 90 seconds, the aircraft does not receive certification. This standard exists directly because of what happened on Saudia Flight 163. The sixth change addressed cabin materials. Modern aircraft interiors use fire-resistant materials throughout. Seat cushions include multiple fire-blocking layers. Wall panels resist combustion. Carpeting contains fire-retardant treatments. All materials meet strict standards for smoke production. When exposed to heat, they produce significantly less toxic smoke than older materials, giving passengers and crew more time to evacuate before conditions become unsurvivable. The seventh change improved airport emergency coordination. Rescue crews are now explicitly authorized to approach an aircraft immediately if fire or smoke is visible from the exterior. They do not wait for cockpit clearance. They position for immediate intervention without delay. Collectively, these changes represent a fundamental shift in aviation's philosophy. From operational concerns to absolute prioritization of passenger survival. From hierarchical decision-making to collaborative crew resource management. From flexibility in emergencies to mandatory, non-negotiable action. These changes could not bring back 301 people, but they have unquestionably saved thousands of lives since. Similar emergencies have occurred many times in the decades that followed. Aircraft have landed with fires on board. Modern crews trained under these protocols evacuate without hesitation. Passengers escape. The lessons of Saudia 163 are now permanently embedded in every emergency evacuation procedure used worldwide. Aviation safety is built on learning from tragedy. Subscribe to see how every accident makes flying safer. August 19, 1980. 301 people boarded Saudia Flight 163 for a routine domestic flight. 7 minutes after takeoff, fire broke out in the aft cargo compartment. The crew declared an emergency and returned to Riyadh. The pilots executed a successful emergency landing. The aircraft touched down smoothly. All systems were functioning. Fire crews were standing by. Everyone was alive. And then, for 23 minutes, nothing happened. No immediate evacuation order. No engine shutdown. No doors opened. The captain attempted to taxi to the terminal. He prioritized operational concerns over passenger survival. The first officer suggested immediate evacuation. The flight engineer reported worsening conditions, but the captain maintained command authority. By the time rescue crews finally entered the aircraft, everyone inside was dead. All 301 people. Not because the fire was unsurvivable, not because the landing failed, not because the aircraft was damaged, but because evacuation did not begin until it was too late. The investigation changed aviation forever. Immediate evacuation became mandatory worldwide. Crew communication systems improved dramatically. Engine shutdown became automatic. Cockpit culture transformed from hierarchy to teamwork. Modern passengers are safer because 301 people died waiting for doors that never opened. Their deaths were not in vain. Every evacuation procedure in use today carries the lessons learned from their tragedy. Every passenger who escapes a burning aircraft safely stands on the foundation built by their sacrifice. Let me know your thoughts below. Every crash teaches a lesson that saves future lives. Subscribe to understand how aviation learns from failure. Because the safety you experience today was built on tragedies like this. And the next breakthrough might come from an accident that hasn't happened yet.